video myself because I took a class from Parents Helping Parents about learning to be an advocate for our children, and I wanted to show my facilitator what I've been able to do. Beautiful. Let me just get into the right program. There we go. Maybe. Just looking at my messages. Work. Lost connection, so it's being a jerk. Okay, there we go. You can see it now? Okay, so I got married really young. Well, for today's standards, I was 21, and we wanted to have kids right away. So we got pregnant. Everything went smoothly. I had been an only child, so I knew I wanted to have I wanted to have lots of children. My husband had two siblings, and we, so we thought this was going to be our first of many kids. We got pregnant, but everything went smoothly. And then Thanksgiving of that year, where he was due in January. At Thanksgiving, I noticed he wasn't moving so much, and I was like, I don't know if that's, am I supposed to be worried about that? What's going on? And my sister-in-law, who already had two kids, at Thanksgiving dinner, she said, you should call your OB tomorrow. I'm like, okay. So I called the OB, they fit me in, and did an ultrasound, and my doctor was on call that weekend, and she came to see me, and she said, there's something going on with your baby. He's, for one thing, he's sideways, so you can't just deliver him, regular. But also there's fluid in his abdomen, and it could be any number of things, but he needs to come out now. And my husband and I had been sitting there going, oh, this is boring, we get this over with, let's go to McDonald's on the way home, whatever. And so she was like, well, at this hospital we don't have a high-level NICU, but they have a high-level NICU at Good Samaritan, so we're going to transfer you. I was like, oh, okay, we'll just drive over there. She's like, no, you're going in an ambulance. So we got in the ambulance and went over to Good Sam, and you can see in this first picture, this is us trying to have labor, because by the time we got there, Ricky turned head down, although he was transverse. And they were like, okay, well, let's try and get labor going. And the special obstetrician, I can't remember what the title is, he came to see us, and he said, it looks like, there's fluid in his abdomen, in the baby's abdomen. They knew it was a boy, they didn't tell us yet. So we're thinking it could be this condition where he has some bowel issues, might have to take medication. He didn't call it cystic fibrosis, so we had no clue. And so he needs to be delivered. Like, the reality, wow, he's going to be early, he's going to be in the NICU. That's all that was on my mind. This is scary. Called our parents. They would come and visit us, and then go, and nothing happened. 2 days go by, no labor. I was trying to induce me, and then they noticed on early Sunday morning that his heart rate was starting to decelerate. When I had really minor little contractions, and his heart rate was dipping, and they said, we're just gonna you're gonna have a C-section. And so then it was like, because we'd been to birthing classes and had, a whole plan and everything. And so we went into the living room, and that's my belly in the picture there, having a C-section. And when he came out, his belly was huge. That's I don't know if you can see in the right picture, it was ginormous. And if he had, in my opinion, if I delivered it vaginally, might not have made it, because he was just so big, so distended, and he was over 6 pounds at 7 weeks early. they did some imaging and said, well, it looks like his small intestine perforated, and we were back up in a room, and the pediatric surgeon came and said, we're going to be doing the surgery where we'll go in and see, either we'll fix what's going on in there, or he'll have a colostomy bag for a little while. And my grandma had sent me a Thanksgiving card. My parents brought it to the hospital for me when we were trying to have labor. So I still have this Thanksgiving card because the doctor drew a diagram of what he was doing on this card. It's in the baby book. And so this is what we're gonna do. And so they got in there, and I couldn't even get out of bed. I had a spinal anesthetic, and I had spinal headache from it. So I had to lay flat for like 2 days because I guess it's a leak of spinal fluid, and I was just miserable. So I was hearing everything actually these pictures were taken through the NICU window by my in-laws. They couldn't even go in and see him. They took him to surgery. He had a few centimeters of small bowel taken out, which is apparently enough to cause a lot of problems later in life. But they had a colostomy bag. I did get wheeled down in my bed, laying flat to see him, which I'm grateful they let me do that. And the neonatologist told me when they were in there was some mucus in his intestines that makes us suspicious that he has cystic fibrosis. And I was like, oh, well, that's something I didn't think about before. I remember years before reading Alex, The Life of a Child. I'm a voracious reader, so I like to read about medical stuff too, so little did I know. And so I had read that, and there had been a Reader's Digest article I read in a doctor's office one time about these two teens with CF who fell in love, and this forbidden love thing, right? And that's about what I knew about CF. So I was like, well, I'm sure you don't have that. I didn't know how the genetics worked. I was like, we don't have that in our family, it's fine, it's gonna be fine. But we would have had it in our family by now. And so I recovered. I started coming to see him every day. Before I left the hospital, they set me up with a breast pump, and it was the hospital grade one. It was blue, this big thing. And my mom called it Ricky's little blue brother. So I pumped lots and lots and lots of milk. They started giving it to him. From the beginning, he couldn't suck and breathe. He kept dipping his heart rate and stopping breathing. And so he was getting it by gavage. That's in the first, no, not in these pictures. He had a tube, and he would be fed breast milk. And in a couple weeks into his NICU stay, the genetic test results came back. They sent them to UCSF. They came back. The neonatologist came to see me one day when I was sitting bedside with Ricky and said, some test results came back. Your son has this condition where he will need to take medication for his whole life. He'll need to go on special formula. It's called progestin. Won't be able to breastfeed. And I was like, he didn't say cystic fibrosis. And so I was just upset that I wouldn't be able to breastfeed him. So I got on the phone, no cell phones, got on the phone at the bedside and called at my mom and said, they said he has this condition, I won't be able to nurse him. I was really upset. My mom and I are both big breastfeeding advocates and everything. And, so I talked to her. I sat with Ricky, and then the nurse, he had a couple of primary nurses, and we were really close with them already. And she comes and she goes, so something, when a child has cystic fibrosis, that, and the other, and I'm like, what? And she said, what do you mean, what? I said, you said he has cystic fibrosis? And she said, well, yes, didn't Dr. Rosa tell you? And I said, no. And she was like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. Yes, he has CF. And then she told me some about it. Subsequently, I went to the library and looked it up on the databases, and all the articles were, 20 years old and horrible, and, so at first it was super shocking and terrible. One thing I did, I couldn't track down any of his doctors, even the neonatologists, you hardly ever saw them. But one day they told me that the gastroenterologist was coming, and I said, so the doctor, the special obstetrician office was in the hospital, and I was going to have a check on my staples, and I said, if she shows up, send her there to talk to me, because I have all these questions. And they said, okay, we will. And the nurses were great advocates in the NICU. So I went over to the doctor's office in the hospital, and they, we just chatted, and he checked my staples, and then Dr. McCracken, the gastroenterologist, she showed up. He let us have his office, and I asked her all the questions I had written down about CF, and she said, well, he has delta F508, this is a severe mutation, and he has this other one that's not as severe from what we know, which is Q493X, so maybe his disease will not be that bad. And I was like, that's when it started, and like for his whole life now, not knowing what the future was gonna be like, was like the horrible thing, like, what's gonna happen with him, and is he gonna be okay, is he gonna be really sick, is he gonna die when he's a kid? I had no idea. This is the first time I ever held him. He was on the ventilator and everything. Just a little guy, and there I am as a baby also. My dad would visit him every day and take pictures. So we have my dad had his own business, he was a mechanic, and on the way to work every day, the hospital was on the way, and he would stop and visit Ricky. So for me, that first conversation with the gastroenterologist, who by the way saw Ricky well into his teens before CCS, which is the California Children's Services, and they pay for things that the insurance doesn't pay for, basically, and it's income-based. So when they stopped paying for her, that's when we stopped seeing her. So she was his doctor for over a decade. That was my first time ever advocating for my kid. And it was just the start of many years of advocating for my kid. And it was significant, and it's hard to stand up to a doctor, it's hard to demand information. That was the first time I did it, and it was kind of remarkable for me that I was able to do it at 22, brand new mom, like trial by fire. Here's motherhood, you have a child in the NICU. So he went home the day after his due date. He had been reconnected, his intestines. He's never had to have bowel surgery again, thank goodness. He did go home with a little hernia. So when he was 6 months old, we went back, this time to Stanford, and he had his hernia corrected, and that's my dad when he was a little older. But a couple things that I remember about that hospitalization is we were at Packard for the first time. We had seen Dr. Conrad once, I think, by that point, and this is our first time inpatient there. And next door to us was this guy in his 30s with CF. We could hear him getting, there was no vest yet. He was getting manual percussion and treatments, and I'm like, why is there an adult here? And they said, well, we don't have an adult CF, area in the hospital, so they still come to Packard when they get admitted. Okay. And so we were just there overnight, and they said, well, we're going to do a sweat test. I was like, we already know he has CF, but they did the sweat test, and it came out positive. I don't remember the number, but so from there, Ricky actually was fairly healthy the first year. They sent us home with like a lot of premature babies with a monitor to make sure he kept breathing. We never had a problem. The kid was trained by the NICU nurses to sleep through the night and slept like 20 hours a day. So I was really lucky because my other two kids, terrible sleepers. When he was 13 months old, he got RSV and ended up in the hospital. And then when we decided to have another child, whether that was a good idea at the time or not. I mean, obviously it turned out great. But we had Andrew, and he does not have CF. But when I was very pregnant with him, Ricky cultured Pseudomonas for the first time. And the way they would get to sputum then, because he was little, is they would gag him with a swab, and it was traumatic. He grew Pseudomonas, so he put him in the hospital to try and eradicate it. And I was thinking, why are we having another baby? We didn't know yet if Andrew was going to have CF. And why are we doing this? Oh, I mean, I thought everything was going to be okay, and now I'm questioning my choices. But we went home. All was good. He did have his second birthday in the hospital, which really sucked. I had to cancel his birthday party. We made the best of it. His birthday's right after Thanksgiving, so we brought in, what you call it, the place with the turkey sandwiches and stuff. Anyway, I don't know. We brought in turkey dinner for everybody and the family, and then we had that in the day room at the hospital, and then we had his birthday a couple days later, and made the best of it. And that was just first of many holidays / birthday that we had in the hospital. I think we've had every holiday in the hospital at some point, like Easter, actually not Christmas, Easter, Halloween, multiple birthdays. His 5th birthday was another one. So when he was 4, he had sinus surgery. That's in the first picture, his first sinus surgery, Dr. Messner. And one thing that my parents and I always went to the CF conferences, and my dad was another big advocate for Ricky. He taught me, to do my research and to do my due diligence, ask lots of questions. And there was when he was about to have a sinus surgery, that conference, there was a talk by a doctor who was doing who did CF sinus surgery, and she had done studies, and my dad got up and asked all these questions, and so, I was learning from him about, he'd done his research. We kind of had the internet at that point. It was sort of early, but he had some questions to ask based on stuff he read. And then we had the sinus surgery. This middle picture, we'd go see my dad at work. He was a mechanic, and that's Ricky helping.
So cute.
If you're from San Jose, or if you've been in San Jose, the place where my dad's shop is now a seafood restaurant, and you can sit in where the lift used to be and have your food. It's called Dia de Pesca. It's on Bascom. So I had that surreal experience recently.
Wow.
So then he started to be hospitalized fairly regularly, at least once a year. He was hard because he was always very, very active, and would run from the IV pole, or, there was always some crisis where he needed to get out of bed, or he refused his treatments, or what we found out later is he had some, by this point he'd already been in speech therapy and occupational therapy, and whether due to prematurity or some other reason, he had some deficits, in his skills, fine motor and speech. So we were doing all that stuff. This is his 5th birthday, and there's his little brother. And first time we did PFTs there, or spirometry, when he was coming up on 5 years old, my dad passed away. He had stage 4 melanoma, and I had his skin, so I'm super careful with my moles and everything. It was in his brain, his organs, his spine is where it first popped up. And he also had separately lung cancer. So he passed away in May of 2020, and this was hugely, obviously it affected all of us, but he was really close with the kids, and it was really, really hard. And he had always been at the conferences with us and support groups, and so that was super difficult. And my mom is, it's 25 years later, she still can't believe he's gone. They were supposed to be together for many more decades. One thing we got to do, because of Ricky having CF, was go on a Make-A-Wish trip. and we went on a Disney cruise. That's on the left. This was after I had divorced their dad. I had remarried in 2004, and we had an awesome wish trip. And because of being part of Greater Bay Area Make-A-Wish, we got to meet the Blue Angels. That's on the right side. And every year they'd have a Christmas party that we got to go to. And when they gave the millionth wish, they sent us all to the amusement park in Vallejo, Six Flags. So we also got to do that. Now, meanwhile, Ricky started having issues in kindergarten from the start. He was inappropriate. He'd get up, he'd bug kids who didn't want to play with him. He had issues from the beginning, and it took me almost the whole school year to get them to evaluate him, and they're supposed to do that within a certain amount of time, 30 days. They're supposed to give you a plan, I think. So that's another fight I had to fight. I had to contact the state and tell them that the school district wasn't doing what they were supposed to do. This is, meanwhile, during this time I was working full-time, which is really hard with a kid with medical needs to begin with. And then he, and later his brother, didn't do well at daycare, and so we flunked out of lots of daycares and preschools before kindergarten. So I fought and fought and fought, and finally by this time of year, in his kindergarten year, they finally evaluated him, and he also had an evaluation up here at Children's Health Council, at Stanford Psychiatry, and they showed he had a fairly low IQ, borderline IQ, and speech delay, fine motor skill delay. Oop, I skipped it again. And so he got services starting in first grade. He ended up being in special classes through his senior year, all the way through. And overall, his education was, he got what he needed in the end, but I had to be right on everybody's case all the time. And it was almost like having two full-time jobs. I had one full-time job advocating for Ricky and his brother, who also was in special day classes for other reasons, and my full-time job working for the city of San Jose. So eventually we had Misty, who now goes by Quinn, that's the baby, and Ricky and Andrew and Misty and I ended up on our own when her dad and I split up. So that happened when Misty was 2, so rough. We were fortunate to have, Ricky had the opportunity to be in the special, AYSO in San Jose has a special needs soccer, and what they do is they have volunteer kids who run along with them and show them what to do, and it was really cool. So he did that for a couple of years. He was pretty good at it. He's a little uncoordinated, but he made it work. During this time, he was diagnosed as bipolar NOS, and they also said PDD NOS, which is a autism spectrum thing that doesn't exist anymore. And he was on various medications, one of which caused him to have seizures. So then he was diagnosed with seizure disorder. Wellbutrin can lower your seizure threshold, as it turns out. And he had an abnormality in his brain, probably from prematurity. That was this cocktail that made him have a seizure. So he's been on seizure meds ever since. He hasn't had another big one since then. His little sister now has epilepsy, but I don't know if that's related. So, we went along. You can see we had started off with the Hillron vest, and then we got Protect vest because I saw it at the conference and said, we want that. So much better. So there's been a couple pictures of Andrew, but you can see my other kids, they kind of grew up being at the hospital with Ricky. Misty called it the hot pistol. We learned in one of these, there's another example of when I've had to say something to people about, one time when he came home from the hospital, they took off his dressing and he got this horrible highs all over his arm. And they were like, well, we think he's allergic to the tegaderm. Okay. All over his charts, allergic to tegaderm. But every time we go to the emergency room to be admitted, they put tegaderm on there because that's their go-to. Mm-hmm. And he got to where he recognized it also and be like, you can't put that on me. Mm-hmm. So I'd have to stand up to them and say, that's tegaderm, we can't have that on him. And so yeah, we still deal with that. Mm. He got a port, and which helped with the IVs, because at some point he couldn't get a PICC line in there anymore because he was so scarred up. Mm-hmm. So in elementary, middle school, it was funny, I was looking back on my blog and my Facebook last night, and he was in the hospital 1 to 2 times a year pretty consistently, sometimes a little more. Sometimes he wouldn't get completely well and he'd end right back up in there. Yeah, that was life. His FEV1 was down in the 50s. So I nominated Ricky. This was shortly after split up from Quinn's dad. Nominated Ricky as a hero of hope for Genentech. And they contacted me and they said, well, we're not going to have him be a hero of hope, but we were wondering, would you be interested in having him come? Would you guys like to come to San Francisco? And we'll put you up in a hotel and we'll do a photo shoot for our publicity materials. And I was like, okay. They put us up in that old hotel over Union Square. It was like in November, December. And so they had the ice skating in Union Square. And they paid for all of our meals and everything. My mom came with us to watch the baby. And I ice skated with the boys. We tried to ice skate. It was just like holding onto the wall like this. And then we rode the cable car just so they could see what that was like. And we did this photo shoot. Apparently there's this service where people rent out their fancy houses for these kinds of things. And it was this house in the Berkeley Hills. They took us across the bay in a limousine. And there's Ricky being interviewed. And then we told him he liked soccer, so they got him a soccer ball. All the clothes we were wearing were all clothes that they gave us. They bought them based on our sizes. And, there's that picture again. So there's one of the pictures that came from that whole thing. Wow. And then they sent me a CD with all the pictures. And then I was driving with the kids to San Francisco when they were meeting friends at the aquarium. And we saw this this billboard.
Wow. Right on.
It was northbound by SFO. There's like a Hertz car rental, and then there's this billboard. Until I drove around for like an hour trying to get a good angle on it. Eventually, I emailed Genentech, my contact, and they had these good pictures. So I don't know what those other people have, but there's Ricky, the poster boy for Palmazine. And apparently they had him on banners all around the Genentech campus.
Amazing.
Yeah, it was really
He's
cool.
such
It was a really cool experience.
Yeah, very, very handsome.
And then, like I said, Misty, Quinn, yes. She was concerned because, he wasn't feeling well. And an issue we had with Ricky is he would go in the hospital for his lungs. And in Packard, they wouldn't let you leave the room because of cross-infection issues, especially because he cultured Pseudomonas and Stenotrophomonas, and they don't want cross-infection going on. They also don't want the cancer patients to get these bugs. So then he would blow up with poop because he wasn't moving around and he couldn't go to the bathroom. And then he'd end up with an obstruction or dios, and we would have to deal with that. And his lungs would be better within a week, but then we'd be dealing with this for another week or 2 weeks. He had to have gastrographine enemas, manual bowel disimpaction. If you don't know what these things are, be glad. It was really horrible. And his gastroenterologist, that same one, she would come up there, and she had privileges up here at Stanford, and she would come get through that with us. And in the second picture, they wanted to see what was going on with his brain activity with his seizures. So they had him on a 24-hour video EEG, which I didn't even know was a thing. But so they had this card with it computer at the end of the bed videoing him, and he had that cap with all the wires on his head. And yes, there was still seizure activity. So, things went on. Here he is. I did a little comparison picture. And then
Nice.
he had another sinus surgery as a teen. And this time it was the big sinus surgery, the rotor-rooter, where they go in there and take out all the cartilage and everything.
Oh.
And Ricky has a really high pain tolerance. I think he took the Norco like 2 times when he got home, and then he was like, I don't need that, it doesn't help me, it's fine. And he's always been really into his computers and technology, and so he would bring his computer and work on, he was a Roblox developer in his teens, and work on that. And one time I got Roblox, they're based in San Mateo, I got them to send, I didn't ask, but I said, cool, somebody come visit him or send some swag or something, because what I would always, when he get bowel obstructed, they would have to put an NG tube down, which is like his least favorite thing in the world, and I haven't had one now, I can tell you it sucks. So I would bribe him with Roblox gift cards if he would just let them put the NG tube in, and because then they pump go lightly through to get him to go. And so Roblox, one time, I don't have a picture of it, but they sent one of their programmers down there to sit with Ricky, and they visited for like 2 hours and talked all about Roblox. And if you've met Ricky, he never stops talking. He's been like that his whole life. He's 29, he still never stops talking. So he had a great time with this guy. I had a video also, he was having his vest done, and he and the respiratory tech were talking about anime. He's going, he's talking about the anime. The video was really loud, so I couldn't have the slideshow, but it was hilarious. He could engage anybody in conversation and say, "How's your day?" And they'll tell him, and they'll have this conversation, and whether the person really expected to be doing that or not, even if it's like 2 in the morning and they're coming to do his treatments. In December 2015, Ricky went in with, I believe it was the flu. It all kind of blends together now, these hospitalizations. I believe this is when he had flu A, H1N1, and he got obstructed again because they wouldn't let him leave the room. And what happens is his bowels start to push up on his lungs, and then his oxygen, he can't breathe fully, and his oxygen dips, and it gets to be an emergency situation. And what was happening this time is he would, even if he tried to get up to go to the bathroom or shift position in bed, he would turn blue. Mm-hmm. And this was super scary, as you can imagine. And I talked to the nurse, and like, can you get the resident, something needs to be done, he needs more breathing support or something. And they dilly-dallied around. Ricky needed to go to the bathroom, he was about to pass out because he couldn't breathe. And they finally, after, like, they were calling me at night saying he couldn't breathe. I'm like, why aren't you people doing anything? And they finally got him to a PICU room and put him on I think this is the non-rebreather mask. And this is when he ended up in the hospital for a month recovering from this. And I am convinced he and I both have some PTSD from this particular hospital visit, because I felt like I was gonna lose him, or he was gonna end up on the ventilator or something terrible. And also, in a room adjacent to ours, one of our little friends, well, I knew the mom through the internet, the girl had a bronchoscopy that went wrong, and she ended up dying while we were in the hospital. And so everything was just really scary at the time. My eventual husband was on a work trip, so it was me and kids dealing with this. And we eventually got through it. He did have Christmas in the hospital. And we got him an Xbox One. Felt like he deserved it. And then he graduated from high school. which we weren't sure that would ever happen because he had a lot of challenges in school. He did it. And this is his last visit with Dr. Conrad before he there's Mary, the nurse, and Dr. Conrad, who didn't like to have her picture taken. His last visit, he went to Dr. Conrad his whole time at Packard and transitioned to the adult clinic. And, here we are still with the visits every so often. This one on the right is the last time he was in the hospital, and that was in 2019, December 2019.
Wow, kidding.
And in the middle there we are, 5 feet apart. He always humors me and wears a CF shirt if I tell him to. So there's when the Trikafta came. As soon as I found out about it, I started bugging the CF team about it. Medi-Cal we have, which is Medicaid, was what it's called in California. He has SSI, so he gets Medicaid. And they gave us some trouble about it. Then they finally, right before the pandemic started, it was in January of 2020, he got Trikafta. He took a video of himself taking it and sent it to me at work. Because he knew I was all. So the pandemic came, Ricky started, he didn't leave the house actually for about 3.5 years, except for medical appointments, because he was terrified of getting COVID, and he still never had it. I've had it 3 times and managed to not give it to him. He got this little 5-year thing from Vertex when he got to 5 years on Trikafta. So to give you an idea, when he started taking it, his lung function, his FEV1 was like in the 40s and 50s. And now it gets as high as 87%. Wow. And so they always said, you have to preserve his lung function, because if there's a cure, that's what they would say at the time. We didn't have in our heads yet that it would be a treatment, not necessarily a cure. When there's a cure, you want his lungs to be good enough that he could benefit from it. And so that's what I always told him, do your treatments, do your best, and he was always, almost always, really good about it. And, but I figured he wasn't gonna gain lung function back. Well, he gained 40% lung function back. His sinuses improved, where he doesn't need to do sinus flushes anymore. He went down his enzymes. He was able to change some of his other medications that I'm forgetting right now, but it's been nothing short of a miracle for us. In the meantime, over the years, he's been diagnosed as being autistic. His IQ is a little low, but he's not considered low functioning. He is going to college and getting his certificate in information technology, that's not what it's called, but he would have to correct me. Something with computers. He's going to get a certificate because to get an associate's degree, you have to take a language and math class, and he can't. We tried. So this picture on the right, that's the last time we went to clinic, because he was culturing mycobacterium, which is the first really significant thing that's happened since he got on Trikafta. But the infectious disease doctor is not worried yet, because he's cultured it twice, but 2 different kinds, and it's not the scary kind. So we're gonna hold off on antibiotics because his lung function is still stellar. He had a lung CT. It actually looked better than before Trikafta. His atelectasis is resolved. All this crazy stuff. He hadn't had a chest CT since before he started Trikafta. And now he's on the lift track, which is the new modulator. And the thing that's happened with that one, I was telling some ladies yesterday, is his bowel problems are now almost fully resolved. On Trikafta, he's been battling being all hard to go and just plugged up and taking tons of Miralax and misoprostol and Amitiz and all these medications. And with Liftrac, it's almost the opposite. He's been able to go off some of those meds. It's like, well, this is the med that's the same as Trikafta, except it fixes that last thing. So, fingers crossed. Still out of the hospital and doing fantastic. So what I wanted to talk about, and after all that, long story short, I don't think that Ricky would be where he's at today if it weren't for, my advocacy. And that sounds like a brag, but it's not. It's just kind of a fact that if he hadn't had me advocating for him in the hospital, there could have been some dire consequences several times. There's been times where I almost passed out, you know, in these procedures with him just because I was so scared and stressed out. I mean, but I was always there by his side, and I feel like if I hadn't advocated and made people do their job, in some cases at the school, at the hospital, we wouldn't be where we're at now. I just want to stress how important it is to always advocate. I'm preaching to the choir here, I know, but you have to always stand up for them, or you don't know what's going to happen. And one thing that's in our family that's always been important is family. And being in the hospital doesn't mean you have to, you know, just be all about medical stuff. You can still have your celebrations, still have family come. I would bring the other kids, you know, when they weren't in school, to hang out with Ricky, bring his friends to play video games with him. You have to make the best of it and find the joy in, you know, he got to trick or treat in the hospital. He got to do an egg hunt in the hospital at Easter. We felt that it was important to keep doing the things we could do and make it as normal as possible, and not be like, oh, my poor sick kid, you know, you can't let him do anything, but also be, you know, an advocate and make sure that he's getting all the treatments he needs. I feel like it's important to do all the fun things you can, because nothing's promised. Things can go south, bad things can happen, and knowing that you got to do those fun things and gave them those chances, that's, you know, it's worth everything. Yeah, it's been quite a ride, and he'll be 30 this year, and I'm just super grateful for all of you, for CFRI. So another thing I was going to mention, when they first gave me the diagnosis, the social worker gave me a CFRI newsletter and said, you should call these guys. I'm like, okay. So I called and I got Ann Robinson on the phone. And she told me all about her son Carl, who was born with the same thing, with a perforated valve. And now he's doing great, and this, that, and the other. And it made me feel so much better. And that was my first call. I called Cystic Fibrosis Foundation. I got somebody's voicemail and left a message, and nobody ever called me back. I called CFRI. I got Ann, and she made me feel like, okay, it's not the end of the world. We're gonna fight this, and we're gonna do this. And that was my first experience with CFRI, and it made a huge difference in our lives, Ricky's life. And you know, the conferences and coming to these retreats, I look forward to this every year and catching up with everybody. I mean, you know, I can talk to people online, but there's nothing like coming and communing with you all. And I feel like this keeps me sane when things are, especially when things are really rough. And you know, we need to have our people, our village. And I just want to thank you all. And that is our story.
Did the tricath change anything in his autism piece?
I wish. Although I love him the way he is, there's things about him that are frustrating for him and for us, and it would be awesome. Autism is not a bad thing, but I feel like things could have been better for him in some ways if he didn't have to deal with challenges that he has.
I think a lot of our kids are neurodivergent
Yes.
Yeah.
in many different ways. I think we all have stories about kids
Well,
being neurodivergent.
And you learn too, these kids also learn to be, if not advocates, at least to have strong personalities. A lot of them, because they have to.
And they're very smart.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah. and we used to say when they were little, it was all these kids, they're so smart. There's got to be the smart gene involved in this too. I mean, they're really smart kids.
Ooh,
That was,
can I just say
Yeah.
one thing? Great job. I was gonna say, you might wanna have him go talk to a counselor at the school about maybe being able to bypass some of those classes. Because I'll tell you, I've advocated for myself and gotten around a lot of stuff.
We tried, we talked to, there's this class that he was in that was like some kind of, systems analysis or something, and it was way beyond his scope, and we tried talking to the counselor to see if we could take a different class instead, or skip it, and they were like, and he's on the disability program, and I think that they would.
Yeah, that's just disheartening to think that somebody wouldn't be able to get a degree, you know, like there was a way.
Yeah, there was that one, and there was gonna be
Another
algebra,
counselor.
which we could have helped them with, we could have got through the algebra probably, but they were like, no, you can't take a different class, or you can't do that, unfortunately.
Maybe at some point we still could.
Yeah, we'll
Yeah.
try, we can try, yeah, like I attended the Zoom with the counselor with them, because he still needs me to go to his appointments and stuff with them because he doesn't remember the things to ask sometimes, and so I did the counselor meeting with them, but she was just like,
Yeah,
But
maybe
maybe
there's
we'll
some
talk to
other
somebody else.
avenue.
yeah,
Yeah.
I'm not giving up on it.
Yeah.
At least he can get a certificate, and maybe he can upgrade it to an associate's degree.
Yeah, that's awesome.
I wanted to, may I say something about, because I hear you saying several times that he got blocked because he couldn't move in the hospital. And for the new moms out there, I know that's a big issue because, I mean, Gianna, whenever she was hospitalized, is you are stuck in your room.
Yeah.
But one easy solution for little kids that I enjoy so much is those bowls that you grab from the front and they jump.
Oh, we did have one of those before, yeah.
Yeah, so it's like they jump. We got that for Gianna and like kept her jumping there for hours in the room because that's all she could do.
They also brought the little
And
pedal thing.
Yeah, so that was very helpful for people who, when they have the little kiddos, because they need to burn the energy and move, and that's simple and not expensive.
It's a good idea.
Yeah.
Or also there's little trampolines, the physical
Oh, the little
trampolines,
trampoline, yeah.
too, yeah.
thank you, Rebecca.